Hi, Kate. Good to see you again. I loved meeting you in New York at our mutual friend Selena Sue's apartment for that mastermind, and I'm so thrilled to finally have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here.
So, Kate, I wanted to bring you on because I read your book literally the day I met you. I think on the walk back to my hotel, I ordered Do Less, had it shipped to my house by the time I returned. And it is such a fascinating book because it approaches this idea of productivity in a completely new way, right? In a way that honors our bodies and our natural, especially as women, our natural cycles. And so I want to bring you on to discuss this case study and how you actually applied your own strategy to your business to take 7 weeks off this summer. Before we get into that, though, we always like to start our interviews by asking our guests their own cubicle to CEO story. So, if there was a particular catalyst that made you finally break free from employee life to becoming an entrepreneur, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I have a very atypical story for you, which is that I've only had a quote unquote real job once for 4 months.
I love
Um,
it.
and I have the opposite story, which is that I was an entrepreneur right out of college and I ended up going to get a job and I felt real I had the opposite story. I come from an entrepreneurial family. Well, my mom is. And all her siblings are all entrepreneurs. She's the only one who finished college, but everyone is very successful. And I remember the day I decided to take this job. It was as a junior account executive at an event planning company. And I was really scared to call my mom because I thought she would be disappointed in me, which I think is the opposite for so many people. They're afraid to tell their parents that they're going out as a business owner because they're afraid that they're going to get judgment. And I had the opposite. So I did go and work for somebody else for 4 months. But the moment, I will never forget the moment that I realized I had been on the right track to begin with, which is I had planned this event over the weekend. Like, I think it was a party of some kind. I don't know if it was my birthday. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But I had this whole thing I was doing over the weekend. And then my boss was like, I need you to work. We have this last minute event. It's for a really important client, whatever. And I was like, no. I have this thing I'm doing over the weekend. And he was just like, what do you mean? Like, and,
You have a
and,
life?
and I was like, wait, oh, this is how I see why people don't want to have jobs because they think they own you. And I was like, dude, my time is my own. I did end up working the event and, whatever, but I was just like, this is for the birds. So I gave my notice the following Monday.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I love this story. This is why I always like to ask because people have such different paths to ultimately why they're running the business they're running now. You're not the first guest actually to have not really had that typical corporate experience that they then exited. But I love that for you, that story of like you being afraid to disappoint your mom is just hilarious to me because, yeah, you're right. That's not the typical conversation that happens. And I mean, we could spend all day talking about your whole backstory leading you to what you do now with the Origin company. But for the sake of time, anyone listening, if you're intrigued by Kate's background, which you should be, do yourself a favor, Google her story, listen to her other interviews where she goes more into the backstory. But for today's case study, you took 7 weeks off this summer. For some context, are you someone who normally takes a sabbatical every year anyways? No. So
No.
was this the first ever or the first in a long while?
This was the first ever sabbatical. I did take 4 months off for no, not 4 months, 4 weeks. I took 4 weeks off for my honeymoon in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And I took 3 months off for my first maternity leave and 3 months off plus 5 months of plus like another 2 months of like kind of not work, like easing in. So 3 months first maternity leave, 5 months second maternity leave. So I will say this was not my first time taking time off, but it was my first time taking time off in a very long time, without having just given birth. So it
Yes.
felt
So
very
without
different.
Yes, without your body requiring you to be, yeah, restful. So I want to know why this summer were you like, I'm going to do it? And also, why 7 weeks? Was that a strategic or like a intentional thing? Or was that just like, I just feel like 7 weeks?
So much of my life right now is dictated by my kids. I have a 4.5-year-old and a 7-year-old. So shout out to all the parents out there. In March, I just had this realization that my little one was going to be in full-time school for the first time in the fall. And I just started to feel like time was passing by really fast and that my kids were going to be old soon. And I just realized, like time is of the essence and I want to have this summer with them. And then also we had an au pair who was leaving at the end of July. No, sorry, the beginning of July, the end of June. And so and we were going to spend the summer, I live in Miami. We were going to spend the summer up north in Maine, and I didn't want to go about trying to figure out childcare for the summer. And so I was just like, it's going to be easier if I just don't work and I'm on it with the kids. And then I get to spend time with the kids and everyone wins. And then we'll come back to Miami and figure out our childcare situation. So it was it was mostly a logistical. And that's why 7 weeks was the time between when our au pair left and when school started.
Well, I think 7 weeks it sounds really ideal. It's longer than a month. So it's not just this, one cycle, so to speak, 30 days in your life, but it's also not so long that, I feel like you probably relate as entrepreneurs, we get really antsy and we're like, oh, we
Totally.
kind of get that creative spark and we want to get back into it because it's fun. So I want to first give a little bit of context for our listeners who are brand new to your world. This idea of egg wisdom and syncing your work to your body's natural cycles. Can you first give us like what does that mean? What are the cycles and what are the typical activities or rest that you see perform well in these different cycles?
Great. So when you are in your reproductive years and you're somebody who has a menstrual cycle, there are 4 very specific hormonal moments that you go through, phases that you go through every single month. And we are taught, oh, this is the time that you can get pregnant. So either here's how to get pregnant or here's how to avoid it. And then we're taught this is the time that you're having your period. So you need a tampon or something. That's like, or we're like, okay, here's the birth control pill. The end.
Yes.
Um,
Very limited education.
we're not given a lot of education. And so what actually happens is so much more vast than that. So the main event of our menstrual cycle is actually ovulation. And just a side note, if you're on hormonal birth control, you're not ovulating. So you're not having a regular cycle. And that's like a whole other topic for another day, but I just want to let you know that. So this doesn't totally apply to you if you're on hormonal birth control. But if you're not, then it does. And so you have 4 different hormonal phases each month, and they go really perfectly with the 4 seasons. So each month, we have this personal moment of feeling like we're in the springtime. And that's our follicular phase. And that's a really great time for new beginnings and getting things going. And you'll have a lot of energy for initiation and newness and trying new things. So if you're somebody who tends to have trouble getting going on anything new, you would want to lean into that time. That's the week after you stop bleeding. So that's when that happens. The other next phase is ovulation. So ovulation phase, there's the moment of ovulation, which is like a moment. But then there's the 3 days-ish, 2 to 3 days before, 2 to 3 days after. So ovulation is like the summertime of our cycle. It's the time when we are going to be at peak verbal fluency and at peak magnetism and at peak energy in terms of being with other people and cross-pollinating our ideas. So it's a wonderful time to attend networking events, to go out, to batch your videos, batch your podcasts. It's a really good time to be selling. It's a great time to do a webinar. So to go live, like all those things would be wonderful during ovulation. The next phase is the luteal phase. The luteal phase is the most misunderstood. So the luteal phase is the 10 to 12 days before your period starts. And our culture has called it PMS, which is premenstrual syndrome. You do not have to have debilitating symptoms during your luteal phase at all. In fact, the luteal phase, when you take really good care of yourself and you are listening to your body and organizing your life a bit around your cycle, the luteal phase can be really lovely. And this is a time when it's the longest phase of all of the phases because it's the time when your brain is most wired to be focused and to really get things done. So we start things like we have this starting energy around the follicular phase. We have this kind of like cross pollinating, getting it out there energy during ovulation. And then we have this winding things down and wrapping things up and like really moving the needle, getting things finished, luteal phase. It's a more inward time. You kind of want to like close the door, have some tea, get your laptop, and just like get her done. So that's the luteal phase. It is the time when we have a stronger negativity filter. So things in your life that need attention might be more annoying at that time. And that's good information because you can just write those things down and keep a list of things that bug you during your luteal phase, because the next phase is your menstrual phase. And this is from the moment you start to bleed until you stop bleeding. So average is 3 to 7 days. And that phase is when your brain is the most interconnected between the left hemispheres and the right hemisphere. So you have the most access to the combination of your logical brain and your creative brain, meaning you're going to be the most intuitive and you're going to be the best at solving problems and making decisions. So that's a wonderful time to rest, reflect, research, and to take everything in that you received during your luteal phase to really meditate on it and really come up with, okay, what am I now going to in this next cycle? What am I now going to initiate? What am I now going to take action on? What project am I going to take on during this next cycle? So that's the basic framework.
I am so amazed at how succinctly you can describe that, give tangible examples of what that looks like in your business. I don't even know you did that in like 5 minutes. I mean, that was gold. Obviously, you're a master at this.
Not my first time.
Not your first rodeo, yes. And if your mind is blown right now because this is the first you've ever been introduced to this concept of, wait a second, so it's not like, oh, I do all of my meetings on Wednesdays. No, it's like, oh, when is the best time in my body to actually show up for this type of work? I encourage you, go below to the show notes wherever you're listening to this. Order Do Less, because this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more specifics that Kate covers in her book. Thank you, by the way, for that very, very helpful refresher on the framework. I would love to know, as you were approaching your 7-week sabbatical this summer, if we apply this to your own life, how did you utilize this cyclical planning ahead of time to prepare for the 7 weeks? And then we'll talk about like, how did this look in practice during the 7 weeks that you had off?
Okay, awesome. So what I used to do, so I'm going to do like the before. So this is sort of like beginner version and then more advanced.
Awesome.
Because what will happen is I talk to people about this and then they're like, that sounds like a really nice idea, but I can't reorganize my entire life according to my menstrual cycle. And I'm like, I totally get it. And I'm not actually asking you to do that. When I started, I was far more literal about it. So I would really try to batch all my podcasts when I was ovulating. And I would really, I do still pretty much keep things super light when I'm having my period, like days 1 and 2. I really try to not schedule a lot. But inevitably there's like a meeting or a call or a group thing, stuff happens. And so I used to be far more like trying to line everything up. And what I found is that wasn't as practical. And so what I do now instead, and hopefully this gives permission to people listening to actually try this on, I look at what I have coming up in my week and I look at what phase of my cycle I'm in. And this is how I planned for the 7 weeks off. And I lean into the kind of energy I'm actually feeling and I do the tasks on my plate with the energy of that face.
Mm.
So, what do I mean by that? Well, because I don't have the most regular cycle. So, like, sometimes my cycle is 24 days, sometimes it's 28 days. So, it's virtually impossible to plan from month to month when it's going to be. Therefore, scheduling things with other people out in advance, like I schedule things months in advance. So, it's just not going to fall on the right day. And I'm not going to create the logistical chaos of rescheduling everything every month.
Hey,
I'm
I'm
just
in my luteal phase, can't talk. Yeah.
Some people do, but that's too much for me.
Right.
So what I do is I'll look and I'm like, oh, okay. So let's say on a week, I got my period and it came a little earlier than I expected. Okay. So I look at that week and I say, is there anything scheduled this week that is not necessary? And then I will reschedule that. So,
Mhm.
okay, is there anything that like really does not need to be done right now? Great. I'm going to take that off the schedule. On the weeks that I'm follicular or that I'm ovulating, though, I know I've got extra capacity those weeks. Like I'm like the Energizer Bunny. I'm a pretty high energy person to begin with. So those weeks, I've got it to give. So if I'm going to not have to, but if there are other things that need to happen, I'm going to put it on those weeks so that I know when to when to have my foot on the gas, which is follicular and ovulation, and when to have my foot on the brake, which is luteal and menstrual. So that's how I work all the time. And here's what ends up happening, which leads into the 7 weeks. When I work this way, which is all the time since the fall of 2016, there's so much more wiggle room in my schedule that this may or may not be helpful to people listening, but I just want you to know, like, things just kind of magically work out all the time.
Mm.
There just always ends up being time for what matters. And then what doesn't matter just doesn't get scheduled. And what we know about Pareto's principle is that 20% of our actions give us 80% of our results. So, by being so much more intentional about my schedule, and I'll talk about how I prepared for a launch and things like that during this time, but being so much more intentional about my schedule, I know what that 20% is. Like, I know for me, my 20% is connecting with people. So, doing things like this. Like, these are the kinds of things that I prioritize because I know from tracking the results in my business, it gets results. Customers find me on podcasts. Also, it's really fun for me. So, I will just say often there's an intersection between what is the most effective for your business and what is the most fun. There may be some crossover there, and like really we need to rewire ourselves from thinking that like if something's worth it, it has to be hard.
Mhm.
Often the easiest things for me are the things that move the needle the most. So it's connecting with people, it's creating content.
I love that.
That's it.
That reframe that we don't have to glorify the struggle, that not everything needs to be so painful, like you said, I think is something I don't know. I mean, it's all over, I guess, in the way that we are taught, like hard work, like equating, hard work with success growing up. I think it's like a narrative that is very hard to unlearn, especially as women. And I really appreciate that you offer that reminder. I also just want to point out for our listeners, one of my favorite takeaways from what you just shared is that not to be like in a punny way, but like if we're talking about your menstrual cycle and your flow, like literally and figuratively, I like that your whole approach to this now that you're more seasoned and wise about utilizing the system, how you are able to add just so much more flexibility to the way that you approach things. And to your point, letting things be either removed completely or pushed off to a later date. I think that's something that I've always struggled with is like I feel like everything has to happen in the now, and if it's on the list, it must be done. And I love that you just gave all of us permission to look at it and go, you know what? This type of task isn't really supported by where I'm at headspace body wise right now. So I'm just going to move it to a week later, 2 weeks later when I'm in a better headspace for that, or just drop it off altogether. So I love that wisdom. Thank you. All right, Kate, let's jump into lightning round. Whatever pops into your head, say the first thing. If you could choose to remain one age forever, what would it be?
33.
Can I ask why? Bonus question.
I mean, it's the first age that came to me, and I feel like even though I'm older than 33 right now, I feel like I feel 33. Like it's like a solid age. There's enough wisdom on board, but also like a lot of youth and vitality and a lot of life in front of you. And I just want to spend the rest of my life feeling like that sort of youthfulness and vitality, but just getting wiser and wiser. So I'm just 33 forever.
Great answer. Well, I look forward to being 33. Question number two. What is the best gift you've ever given, not received?
The best gift I've ever given. Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if it's the best, but it's the most recent one that I'm the most excited about. I really love coming up with thoughtful, creative gifts for my mastermind that go along with the content that we're working on. And this year, the mastermind theme has been money, sex, and power. And our most recent retreat focused a lot on the pelvic bowl as our seat of creative energy and feminine power and expression in the world, and like clearing the energy of the pelvic bowl. So I was going around Seattle on the day before the retreat started, and I just was like, I know there's another gift for these women, and I just like don't I know it's going to jump out at me. And I just decided I couldn't find it anywhere. I went all over Pike Place Market, and then I finally just was randomly in the Nordstrom like home decor section, and they had a whole shelf of candles that were literally just women's pelvises. And I was like, yes, this is amazing.
That's
So I got to
insane.
gift each of the women a pelvic bowl candle, which just really made them laugh, and it made me laugh. And they were also really high end and beautiful.
Oh my God. Okay. That's like the best testimonial right there for just like leaning into what you're presented with, right? And being on the lookout for life's small delights and surprises. That's awesome. Okay, question number three. I felt like this would be a good question to ask you because of the topic of the case study today. What is your favorite way to spend a day off? If you walked us through your favorite day of rest.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I love to just get up when I'm done sleeping. And then I really like to spend a morning like somehow outside, whether it's journaling or reading or taking a walk. So just like really getting that early morning sun in my eyes. I do like all these detox practices. So like my red light and my biomat, and I just like can really go down the self-care. So I would love to just like have like 2 full hours to do all that, plus showering, getting ready properly. Somewhere there would be a workout in there, lunch with girlfriends, getting a massage, going to the beach. And then I just really love to like snuggle up with my husband and watch a show or a movie. That's like that's my favorite thing to do. And so that's how the day would end. And there would be some hanging out and like playing around with my kids, and they're probably making some crafts.
That is so luxurious and both so full and so simple, which I really feel like is kind of like a core lesson here, right? That life doesn't have to be so complicated, or your business to have
Yeah.
joy. Thank you, Kate. Great. Crushed it.
One of my favorite memes of all time says, "Why put off until later what you could straight up cancel?" So just like, yes, I sometimes will move things. And then the most refreshing thing is just being like, I'm going to cross that off my to-do list, and I'm literally just not doing it. And there are some questions that I ask myself at the beginning of every week, and I use my Do Less planner to do this. And every week I plan my week. And as I'm writing down my to-do list, I ask myself, does this need to be done? And I know that sounds so simple, but because we're programmed to believe that we are more valuable if we're doing more things, we will, as a default, put things on our to do list to like give ourselves that feeling of significance that don't need to be done. So I just asked myself, does this need to be done? Yes or no? And sometimes I'm like, you know what? No, we're straight up just not doing that. Then number 2, does it need to be done right now? So does
Mhm.
it need to be done right now? And if the answer is no, this does not need to be done this week, and I'm in a full week of where it's already feeling busy, or I'm in my menstrual phase, or I'll just move it. And then does it need to be done by me? So this comes into the 7 weeks. Does it need to be done by me? The truth is, now in early stages, obviously, most people are running things solo. Great. I ran things solo for a very long time. And now I actually have a really super lean team. And I love the simplicity of that. But even in your household, like, do you have a partner? Do you have children? Are you carrying the load at home unnecessarily when actually somebody else could be thinking about what's for dinner tonight? Like, are you just taking that on because that's what you're programmed to believe is a woman's role, or a person's role? And I'm not assuming everyone listening is women, but just in case you are. Or are you thinking outside the box and thinking like, huh, maybe my partner could be in charge of all the birthday presents for all the birthday parties in pre-K 4. Like, maybe I don't have to do that. So what are the things that you're taking on by default that you could practice asking who else could do this? And so when I was preparing for the 7 weeks off, I really looked at, okay, I know this is going to be a pretty busy spring. So I decided to take the time off in March. I knew we were doing a launch at the end of March and into April, and that I was running a course through April and May. And then I knew we would have some wind down to do. And I knew we were going to do another launch for an evergreen course that I didn't need to actually deliver in June. So all of that got mapped out in terms of something I call the upward cycle of success. So in our company, we use the upward cycle of success, which is based on the menstrual cycle, the lunar cycle, and the seasons. And you really look at your projects and you break them down into these 4 phases. And the 4 phases are the same as what I talked about before. So the first phase we call emergence. That's the same as the springtime energy. So it's when you are getting going on a project. It's the planning phase, it's the ideation, it's the brainstorming, it's putting everything into your project management software. It's all the initiation steps. The next phase is visibility. It's the same energy as ovulation and summertime. That's the time when a project is live, like when people are signing up for your webinar, when they are listening to the podcast that you've launched, when they are buying your thing, when they are, they're at your live event. So that it's like you've shipped. So that's the visibility phase. Then the next phase is the culmination phase. So oftentimes entrepreneurs will skip this phase. It's really important. So it's the same as luteal. It's the energy when, as a company or as a solopreneur, you are now turning your energy within. And so it's not out there promo energy. Now it's in here serving the customer. So it's signing contracts, it's delivering on the promises, it's dotting your I's and crossing your T's. It's building out the members area, it's the tech background stuff, it's the bookkeeping, it's the like wrapping it up and actually completing the thing you said you were going to do. And then the next phase, which is usually skipped, is called the fertile void. And so this phase is the pause and the rest and reflect before you go out and begin to ramp up to launch again. And so this phase in business is usually skipped, much to our detriment, because when we skip that phase, we're not able to integrate the lessons that we received during the last cycle. And so when we were looking at the planning, we knew. Now, by the way, I just want to say in business, during the fertile void, it's not like you're sitting on your couch. What it looks like is, in my company, it looks like sort of business as usual, like our weekly deliverables and our monthly deliverables. So we're not ramping up from something new. We're not really winding down from a launch. We are delivering our weekly content. We're showing up consistently on social. We are delivering our content to our members in our membership. We're showing up inside our courses. So we're just kind of like doing the deliverables. but not like
Yeah.
adding extra things. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. So no emergence, no new things like you said, but just like housekeeping. Like this is what we need to
Kind of
stay
like
stay afloat.
coasting.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are we
Yeah.
doing? How are we coasting? So we looked at, okay, what were the 4 phases for that first launch that was beginning in March? And then what were the 4 phases for the launch that happened in June? So that then we
Mhm.
could really map those out. So that was a pretty rapid cycling for us. We would not usually do a like April launch and then a June launch, but I knew the spring was going to be more intense so that we could front load and take the time, because as a company, most of the content is still delivered by me. And so maybe that'll change over time, but I knew it's not like some major thing was going to be happening over the summer while I was taking time off. Like it was going to be a coasting summer for everyone. And so that allowed us to know we can have a shorter break of business and as usual between March and June, knowing that like for 7 weeks in July and a lot of August, we're going to be in coast mode. So I felt like it was okay to really go for it, knowing that the balance was going to happen over the summer.
That is so helpful to hear how you broke both launches down into those different phases. For you, during your actual 7 week sabbatical this summer, were there how did you, I guess, remove any parts where you're like, "This has to be done by me," right? When you go through your filtering list and you're picking, "Okay, these things don't have to be done by me, these things do have to be done by me." The things that were still your accountable, for, how did you, I guess, like, make sure that those were front loaded if it was part of, like, a process that couldn't like, visibility you could front load, right? But, like, what if there was, like, a delivery aspect, let's say,
Yeah.
that needed to happen during that time period? How did you manage that?
Yeah, and there was. So the only thing that had to be done over the summer was my mastermind. I had 2 group calls with them and one-on-one with. Is that true? Was there one-on-one? There might have been 2. So I think there were 2. So what I did for myself during this time is I just batched all of that. So I knew it's easier for me as a mom to find childcare in a chunk than it is like all over the place. So
Yeah.
usually I won't do more than 2 one-on-one calls a day for my mastermind. And I really will usually only do 4 in a week. It just works for me that way. Some people like to get it all done at once, but that's for me, I find that works the best. And so I just changed it up. And over the summer, I had 2 weeks where I worked about 10 hours. So it
Okay.
wasn't a 100% sabbatical. There were 2 weeks where I worked 10 hours. On those things, I couldn't just be like, oh, hey, team member, can you just deliver this one on one coaching call for my mastermind member? So we don't have a setup like that. And so that worked great for me. And because I love my work, it was incredibly refreshing. And I was delighted to be talking to my clients.
That I think is such a great way to frame how work in the same way that work doesn't have to be struggle or a pain, like you can find rest in work if you're intentional with it, right? If
Yeah.
it's on your own terms.
Well, and especially if you're spending 7 weeks with your children straight, like work becomes a really wonderful break.
Work becomes the weekend. Yes, I love that. That's amazing. So with your team then, I mean you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but just for, a clear picture during the 7 weeks outside of those, 2 short bursts where you came into the business, how did your team use the cyclical planning to, make sure everything is running smoothly during your time off?
Yeah, so we did something fun that we'd never done before. The great thing about taking time off or changing up the schedule a little bit is that it does allow for innovation. And so one of my team members, our community manager, and she helps me with content as well, Takesha, she came up with this idea. So we have a membership called the Origin membership, for people who want to learn how to grow their businesses while doing less with this cyclical planning framework and a bunch of the other tools we teach around productivity. So Takesha was like, why don't we do something called Hot Empress Summer? And so we'll take a break from our regular content calendar and instead we'll do like this sort of festival style Coachella-esque like learning stages, like summer festival where we bring in guest experts and each of the team teaches in their unique zone of genius all these different pop-up lessons, like pop-up stages of this content that our members are really going to love to practically grow their business. And so Takesha taught on attachment style and how your attachment style shows up in entrepreneurship. And we had somebody come in and teach a whole lesson on using LinkedIn to grow your business. And someone else was talking about cyclical content planning. And so we did project management, we did all sorts of things. And I wasn't teaching in the membership for the months of July and August. And so that really allowed them to get into their own phase of visibility within the membership, which was really fun. It actually drew quite a few new members to us also because it was like something new and different. I mean, it's just a basic marketing lesson. Like people like something that's new and different. If they've been seeing you do the same thing for a long time, a pattern interrupt tends to get some good sales.
Yeah.
So that worked really well for them. But mostly the whole company was in coast mode. We did decide to keep our membership doors open for the whole summer and just see what would happen. I can't say that was like the most successful experiment. We did get a lot of new members, but not nearly as many as we would have if we had run like an actual launch. Because, people need to hear about things a bunch of times before they take action. But overall, like it was a success in that the company stayed open and we got to serve our customers and I got a really good break. And then we were able to come back in September and create some really beautiful things.
Well, I really appreciate that honesty. And I think more entrepreneurs need to hear that it's not like every single season of your business needs to be this, goal crushing, wow,
Nope.
exponential growth type of deal. So I really appreciate that you shared that. Now that you have taken a 7-week sabbatical, are you planning to make this a recurring thing?
Yes. I feel like it was the greatest summer ever. Certainly the greatest summer since I've had kids. And I want to do it every year. I'm like, I don't think I can ever go back to working over the summer.
Yeah.
So now I'm planning my 2023 with that in mind. And, maybe I'll take 6 weeks. I don't know that I need the full 7 weeks again, but honestly, it was just so delicious. And I'm like, I think a lot about death in a beautiful way. Like I just think about the fact that when we die, we can't take any of our money with us. We can't take any of our accomplishments with us. And we're just going to want to have spent as much time as we can with the people we love, doing the things we love, actually enjoying our lives. And I'm never going to remember the hours I sat at my laptop. I'm going to remember like the time on the beach with my kids. So I just sort of figured like, and I, in full disclosure, our revenue was down. Like it just was. But here's what was kind of magical. Actually, as I say this, I'm like, that wasn't 100% true. So we looked at our numbers at the end of October. We had already brought in the same amount of revenue that we had in all of 2021 without doing November and December yet. And we're coming in quite ahead. By the end of December, we're coming in quite ahead. And so that feels kind of magical and awesome. And still a bit mysterious, but this is what's happened ever since I tapped into letting my body take the lead in my business. As I said, from a productivity standpoint, everything just kind of gets handled. And then from a money standpoint, everything just kind of gets handled. So I've gotten into this deeper level of trust and allowing, and I don't have to hold so tight to like my metrics and projections and that's, I'm a seasoned entrepreneur. We have some cushion. So I'm saying that, this is not like, I'm not like in year one and I won't eat if we don't hit our revenue. So,
right. And
we can temper that with that truth.
Well, I appreciate the context because that's something that I really try to drive home for our community is, take what you can from any of these inspiring, incredible conversations with people like you, but also understand from which vantage point or viewpoint they're sharing it from, right? So I really appreciate that. And congratulations, by the way. I think that's incredible that rest produced these incredible results in your business. I know you said you haven't really maybe like thought like analytically about why that was, but do you have any like gut feeling about why that may be?
Yeah, I do. I mean, so one thing is, my mastermind became a very large portion of our revenue this year.
Mhm.
I massively increased the value of the offer and I increased the price, and it was very easy to fill. And so that was part of the reason that revenue has been higher this year. I mean, just really logistically, right?
Yeah.
Which is great. And our membership has dwindled because we haven't put a lot of energy and attention on growing it. However, the value that people receive in there is really consistently amazing. And so we keep our members, having that monthly recurring revenue is our bread and butter. I mean, it's amazing. And so I don't know if you have an episode on memberships. I would imagine you do, but for whoever's listening, like go listen to that. I love that business model, and it really does allow for a lot of coasting,
Yeah.
because having that subscription model where you just know that this amount of revenue is coming in and month out, there's a lot of exhale in there. So that's one of our revenue streams. So increasing the price of the mastermind for sure made a huge difference. Increasing or not just the membership, just being there, because it always has been. And then the other thing we did is we experimented with a different launch model in the spring, and we experimented with a model of with a brand new course. Again, I said that at least for my people, they like something new. I've been in the online world since 2010, and so it's been a long time. And so my folks, a lot of them are like, hey, what else you got? I already bought everything else. And so we did a new course, and it did really well, and it was something I was really enthusiastic about, something I'd been researching and exploring. It was called Regenerative Business, and it was really looking at how can we use the model of regenerative agriculture
Hmm.
to model how we can run our businesses in ways that replenish ourselves, our teams, our customers, the earth, our communities, as opposed to extract them. So that program did really well, and that was our spring launch. But in full transparency, our June launch kind of bombed. So it all it all kind of evened out, and then we had the consistent payments from the spring launch that were going all summer. And then by bombed, it just didn't do as well as we thought. But it brought in revenue, and so that also really helped. So those were the things that contributed to the revenue. And it all Oh, and then I did a last minute affiliate promotion of a friend's podcasting course because it was fun and easy and I didn't have anything else scheduled. And that just was sort of like a pop up, like, this is fun. Which also is an example of I did that. I think it was at the end of September, maybe. It was so nice to have. This is why I love having spaciousness in my company's promotional calendar. And because I was able to sort of spontaneously jump in and do the thing that felt alive in the moment. People will often say to me like, "Oh, I know you're probably too busy for this. You're so busy, da da da." And I'm like, I am not that busy. I have all kinds of time for the things I want to do. And so that really makes a big difference, especially because I think that our revenue can be very much tied to our life force and our enthusiasm. And I want to be able to follow my enthusiasm, because when I get enthusiastic about stuff, it's really easy to make sales.
100%. I feel really inspired by how you operate at a default of not being busy. Whereas, like you said, most of the world likes to assume everybody is busy, or we wear busy as a badge of honor. I'm very guilty of that. And I just love that your default is no, I'm actually really not busy, which is lovely. And I also think it's really cool, like even in the regenerative business course that you launched. I think it's really cool that so much of the work that you do at the Origin Company stems from observing our natural world, or like our world as it is, and drawing inspiration from that and bringing that model or those frameworks or ideas into business. I think it's so unique, and I want everyone to experience what that's like. So, call to action, if you're listening to this is your homework assignment. Make sure you, again, order Kate's book, Do Less. She also has another amazing book, Money, a Love Story. So maybe just bundle 2 in 1 while you're at it. We'll drop the links for you below. And to track those different phases that you talked about today, the Do Less planner would be the best route, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll drop that link for you as well in the show notes. And Kate, to wrap up our amazing conversation today, I want to ask you our final question that we ask all of our guests. And I'm really curious to hear your answer. What does being a CEO mean to you?
Being a CEO really, to me, means having agency and choice and co-creating my life and business with the divine, with source, with sort of the unseen. So having a dance with like my vision and how I want to create things, and then what's presenting itself, whether it's trends in the industry or divine inspiration, or unexpected things that require surrender, and being able to really like work with the forces of the external world to bring my vision to life.
I love it. I feel it just like I'm like literally like moving along as you're explaining this, feeling more in the flow already.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Kate, for your time.
Thanks, Ellen.